To understand the absolute sheer audacity of my daughter-in-law, you need to understand the history of my family. My name is Eleanor. I am 64 years old. When I was 28, my sister and her husband were killed in a tragic car accident. They left behind a 2-year-old boy named Mark. I was single, focused on my career, and completely unprepared for motherhood. But Mark was my blood. I adopted him without a second thought. I never married, because my entire life revolved around giving Mark the best possible future. I worked grueling 80-hour weeks building my own boutique accounting firm. I missed vacations, I skipped luxuries, and I poured every cent I made into his education and his trust fund. By the time Mark was in his late 20s, my firm had been acquired for an 8-figure sum. I was quietly, extremely wealthy. But I don't live like it. I drive a modest Volvo, I wear comfortable sweaters, and I live in a cozy 2-bedroom cottage. Mark, however, developed a taste for the finer things, especially after he met Chloe. Chloe was 24, an aspiring lifestyle influencer who cared more about designer labels than actual human connection. From the moment we met, she looked at me like I was something she had scraped off the bottom of her shoe. Because I didn't wear Prada or carry a Birkin bag, she assumed I was just a poor, working-class spinster holding her husband back. When Mark and Chloe got married, Mark confessed to me that he was drowning in debt, trying to keep up with Chloe's demands. He was terrified she would leave him if he couldn't provide the luxury life she wanted. Like a fool, I stepped in. I wanted my boy to be happy. I bought them a stunning 5-bedroom estate in a gated community in Connecticut, but I wasn't completely stupid. I bought it through a blind trust that I controlled. Mark and Chloe lived there rent-free. They only had to pay the utilities. I also quietly paid off Mark's credit cards every quarter so they wouldn't go bankrupt. Chloe had no idea. Mark begged me not to tell her. He wanted her to think he was the big, successful provider. He told her the house was a company perk from a silent investor he partnered with. I agreed to play along. I let her believe her husband was a titan of industry. I let her treat me like a peasant. I swallowed my pride for 5 years, just to keep the peace. But peace is a luxury you cannot afford when you are dealing with a parasite. The breaking point arrived on Thanksgiving. Chloe had decided to host a massive dinner party, but this wasn't a family gathering. This was a high society networking event. She invited local politicians, wealthy country club members, and her own incredibly snooty parents. I arrived at 4 p.m., carrying a homemade pecan pie, Mark's favorite. When Chloe opened the door, she looked me up and down. I was wearing a simple, neat navy dress. She was wearing a silk gown that probably cost more than my first car. "Oh, Eleanor," she sighed, not even attempting to sound polite. "You're early. Look, the caterers are running behind. Do me a favor and take that pie to the kitchen, and then see if you can help the staff polish the silver." She was treating me like the hired help. I bit my tongue, walked to the kitchen, and set the pie down. When dinner was finally served, I walked out to the grand dining room. There were 24 beautifully decorated seats, but there was no name card for me. I caught Mark's eye across the room. He looked incredibly uncomfortable and quickly looked down at his plate. Chloe walked up behind me and put a hand on my shoulder, her perfectly manicured nails digging in. "Eleanor," she whispered with a fake, sugary smile. "We just ran out of space at the main table. My parents flew in from Aspen, you understand. I've set up a lovely little spot for you in the breakfast nook near the kitchen." She had literally put me at a folding card table, by myself, next to the swinging doors, where the waitstaff was carrying out dirty plates. I sat there for 2 hours. I ate cold turkey. I listened to the roaring laughter from the main dining room. I watched my son, the boy I raised from a toddler, clink glasses with Chloe's father, and completely ignore my existence. Finally, it was time for dessert. I walked into the dining room to see if Mark wanted a slice of the pie I had baked him. But as I walked in, Chloe was standing at the head of the table, tapping her glass with a spoon. "Attention, everyone," she beamed. "Mark and I have an amazing announcement. We are officially putting this house on the market next month. We're buying a massive property out in the Hamptons. We're upgrading our lifestyle to focus on our real family and our future." The guests applauded. I stood frozen in the doorway. Selling the house? They couldn't sell the house. They didn't own it. I walked forward, the silence falling over the room as people noticed me. "Mark," I said quietly. "What is she talking about?" Chloe rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "God, Eleanor, do you have to ruin every moment? We are selling the house. Mark is cashing out his equity. We're moving on." "Mark doesn't have equity," I said, my voice perfectly level. "And you can't sell this house." Chloe let out a loud, cruel laugh. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are telling us what we can and can't do? You're just a sad, lonely old woman who leeches off my husband's success." "Chloe, stop," Mark finally whispered, his face turning pale. But she didn't stop. She turned to the guests, playing the victim. "This is what I have to deal with. She thinks because she took Mark in when he was a kid, she owns him. Well, you don't. You're not his biological mother. You're not blood. You're not even family." The entire dining room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Chloe's parents smirked. The politicians looked away awkwardly. I looked at Mark. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to defend the woman who wiped away his tears, paid for his college, and secretly funded his entire pathetic fake life. He didn't move. He just stared at the tablecloth. Something inside of me snapped, but it wasn't anger. It was clarity. I felt incredibly, beautifully free. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a tantrum. I simply straightened my posture, looked directly at my son, and smiled. "You are absolutely right, Chloe," I said, my voice carrying perfectly across the silent room. "I am not blood. I am not family." I turned my eyes directly to Mark. He finally looked up, and the sheer terror in his eyes told me he knew exactly what was coming. I delivered the sentence, "Which is exactly why the deed to this house and the trust fund paying off your credit cards are legally reverting back to my estate, effective immediately." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Chloe blinked, her fake smile faltering. What are you talking about? Mark owns this house. Mark's company pays for—" "Mark doesn't own a damn thing," I interrupted, my voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper. "I own this house. I bought it through a trust. I let you live here for free, and for the last 5 years, I have been secretly paying off Mark's platinum card so you could buy your little designer handbags and pretend you're rich." Chloe turned to Mark, her face twisting in horror. "Mark? Is she lying? Tell me she's lying." Mark was physically shaking. "Mom, please, let's talk about this in private." "I am not your mother," I replied smoothly. "Your wife just made that very clear, and since I am not family, I will no longer be funding your lifestyle." I looked at the 20 wealthy guests who were now staring at Mark and Chloe like they were complete frauds, because they were. "I will be contacting my lawyers on Monday to begin formal eviction proceedings," I announced. "You have 30 days to vacate my property. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone." I turned on my heel, walked out the front door, got into my Volvo, and drove home. By Monday morning, my phone had over 100 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. I simply forwarded everything to my lawyer. The fallout was spectacular. Without my silent financial backing, Mark and Chloe's entire world disintegrated in a matter of days. I froze the trust fund. I legally severed the credit lines. And true to my word, my lawyer served them with a 30-day notice to vacate the premises. Chloe tried to fight it. She hired a cheap lawyer to try and claim squatters' rights or marital assets, But my legal team crushed them in a single afternoon. The law was completely on my side. The trust owned the house, and I owned the trust. When the reality set in that Mark actually had zero money, zero assets, and a massive mountain of personal debt, Chloe's true colors finally came out. She didn't stay to support her husband through hard times. The moment the designer shoes stopped arriving and the eviction notice was posted on the door, she packed her bags, moved back in with her parents in Aspen, and filed for divorce. Mark had to sell his luxury car just to afford a deposit on a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. 3 months later, he showed up at my cottage. He stood on my porch in the pouring rain, crying. He apologized for everything. He said he was blinded by Chloe, that he was stupid, that I was the only real mother he ever had. He begged me to forgive him and help him pay for his divorce lawyer. I looked at the boy I had given my entire life to. I felt a twinge of sadness, but the door in my heart had already closed. "I forgive you, Mark," I said gently, "but I am no longer your safety net. You are a grown man. It's time you learn how to survive in the real world." I gently closed the door and locked it. I sold the Connecticut estate a few months later for a massive profit. I took that money, retired completely, and spent a year traveling through Europe, drinking wine on the Amalfi Coast, and finally living for myself. Society constantly tells women, especially mothers, that our only value is in what we can provide. We are expected to endure disrespect, tolerate abuse, and quietly write checks to keep the peace. But loyalty is a two-way street. The moment you allow people to convince you that you are worthless, you give them the power to destroy you. I learned the hard way that you cannot buy respect, and you certainly cannot buy love, but you can absolutely pack up your dignity, take your name off the deed, and watch the entitled parasites completely ruin their own lives. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you have ever had to set a nuclear boundary with an ungrateful family member, let me know how you handled it down in the comments below. Never forget your worth, protect your peace, and never let anyone treat you like a guest in a house that you own. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more daily stories, and I will see you in the next one.